The speaker today is Mr. Tshen, who is a zoo archaeologist and a vertebrate paleontologist. Put your hands up to tell me who knows what that was all about. He'll explain later. And he specializes in the study of fossil orangutans and elephants. From 2019 to 2020, he was a research fellow and guest curator, zoo archaeology, of the Sarawak Museum Campus Project. So he had a hand in a lot of the exhibits that you'll see at the new AMC. He received his Master of Philosophy degree from the University of Cambridge in 2021, and his current research topics focus on the evolutionary history of Southeast Asian quaternary mammal faunas and its bearing on modern-day biodiversity conservation. You can see I am not a botanist or a biologist. He is a committee member of and Malaysian Biodiversity Collection Society, and most importantly, he is the honorary secretary of Friends of Sarawak Museum. So we actually have one of our members giving this talk. So, with no further chat from me, I give you Mr. Tshen. We affectionately call him Shen.
Very good afternoon to all, and thank you very much, Anita, for the very nice introductions. All your pronunciations of the technical terms are simply perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. But it's to me, you could call me simply as Arsens. Yeah. Don't call me Dr. Lins or Dr. Tshen, because I haven't yet started my PhD. So it just can be called me as Arsens. And it's very nice. It's a lovely experience to come back again to Kuching and to meet friends, both new and old, and to talk about something that is very, very close to my heart, the orangutans. Now, I left Kuching before the outbreak of the COVID-19. That was about 5 years ago in 2019. I have similar talks organized by FOSM and Malaysian Nature Society Kuching branch on prehistoric orangutans. And 5 years later, today, standing before you, you might as well think that this talk could look like an extension of the previous talk. But there are two new additional points that I'll make in this new talk that will open your eyes about Borneans or Sarawak orangutans. First, I'm going to focus on the modern, not prehistoric, the modern specimens of orangutans collected from Sarawak or West Borneo. And secondly, these are not kept anywhere in Malaysia or in Sarawak. These modern specimens, they are kept in overseas museums. And lastly, I want to tell you that even though these collections may have been collected over 100 years ago, they are still properly curated in the museum overseas, and they're still actively contributed to add new knowledge about Bornean orangutans. Now, before we start the formal talk, I would like to record here my thanks to some organizations and some persons who have helped me in one way or another to tremendously throughout all my research. I would like to thank the museums, both in UK and Italy, that gave me accessibility to the collections of modern day orangutans collected from Sarawak. After the Duckworth Laboratory in Cambridge, the Museum of Zoology in Cambridge, the Natural History Museum in London, the World Museums in Liverpool, and last but not least, the Museum of Natural History of Giacomo Doria in Genova, Italy. And I would also like to thank the libraries, the very rich libraries in Sarawak Museum Department, and Dunjuga foundations, and also the Wildlife Conservation Society of Malaysia, who keep on supplying me with all the very, very precious historical information about orangutans in Sarawak. And this project is a personal project that I started quite a long time ago, and over the years, there are institutions and key persons who have supported me towards the research that went into this talk. And I would like to thank the Central College University of Cambridge, especially the Earl of Cranbrook and Sarawak Museum Campus projects. Last but not least, my all-time supporters, Jared Drawhorns, for giving me tremendous support when I was doing my research in Kuching. So let's start off. The first thing you'll see in this is what is orangutan. Over here, you can't really see the map of Sumatra. Never mind. Okay, orangutans is distributed only in two major islands nowadays in Southeast Asia. Sumatra on the west and Borneo on the east. And it is known variously under different names. It's called Mawas in Sumatra, and over the wider Malay-speaking world, it's called orangutan. And among the Bidayu, Iban, Lundaye, or Lumbawang, they call it Mayas. And I think Mayas is the common name used in Sarawak as well for the orangutans. For the Murud in Sabah, it's called Kahui. The Kadasans and the Sungai communities in Kinabatangan in eastern Sabah call it Kisau. And some of the Sungai communities and also the Kadasan call it Kugyu. And of course, Chinese Mandarins call it Mao Sing Sing. The Hokkien call it Mo Sing Sing. The Cantonese call it Mo Sing Sing. But strangely, our neighbors in Vietnam has a specific term for calling the orangutans. They do not call it orangutans. They do not call it by the scientific names. They call it Dui Ui. So, regardless under what name the orangutans is known, scientifically it's known as three species. The orangutans distributed in northern Sumatra is called the Sumatran orangutan, Pongo hebelii. There's one small population of living orangutans living in the small area south of Lake Toba. It's called the Tapanuli orangutans, Pongo tapalumiensis. And all of the populations of orangutans found in Borneo are known collectively under one scientific name, Pongo pygmeos. But during the prehistoric times, during the last 2.5 million years, when western part of South Asia, they're all connected into one major landmass called Sundaland, orangutan has a much wider distributions across the regions. It's not only found in Borneo and Sumatra, but it's also found on areas that no longer have living orangutans exist today, including the island of Java in the south, central Sumatra, and of course from West Malaysia as well, up to the southern China. Scientists have found evidence of prehistoric orangutans from these vast areas. But today's orangutans are only limited in certain areas of Sumatra and Borneo. They are basically remnants of the previously widespread species. Now, fast forward to the modern day and focus sharply Borneo. I mentioned earlier that all the populations of orangutans in Borneo are known scientifically under one name called Pongo pygmeus. And within Borneo, there are 3 recognized subgroups of orangutans, each with their distinct name. In the northeast is called Pongo pygmeus morio. In the southwest, in Kalimantan, is called Pongo pygmeus wumbiai. And those found on the northwest is called Pongo pygmeus pygmeus. And I know that these scientific names sounds like those names that we'll see in the novels of Tolkien's. But these are the names that we scientists, biologists always stick to because it is used universally across the world. So if I'm in communications with a scientist from, let's say, in Ukraine, and I used Pongo pygmeus, he or she will immediately recognize what I'm talking about. But if I use the local names, Sing, he would just have no idea. If I use Mawas, there will be a lot of question marks in his head. So, as a scientist, we always stick to a one universally used scientific name for the convenience of communications. Now, from this map, it seems like in Sarawak, what sort of subspecies you might have? Only one. Pongo pygmeus pygmeus, the northwest Bornean orangutans. But that may not be the case. Sporadic reports since the 1961 until quite recently, they have found direct and indirect evidence of orangutans in Longmore, in Ba Jawi, close by to one another, and in Usun Apa, in the Upper Baram area. So now what's really puzzling scientists is we are not sure what sort of orangutans are these. Are these far away orangutans related to the northeast, northwest, or perhaps they are a totally new subgroups of orangutans? That remains a scientific puzzle that perhaps future scientists in Sarawak want to work on. Now, much of our current understandings of orangutans in Sarawak stem from all these 4 factors. In the 1960s, we had the report of the Mayas Protection Commissions, headed by Brun and Hell. And subsequently, there was the pioneering research of the American zoologist, George Shallet, with his publications in 1961. And coincidentally, in 1950s or 60s, we have local researchers of orangutans in Sarawak, Barbara Harrison. She was an accomplished archaeologist working alongside with Tom Harrison in Nyang Caves, famous for her analysis work of the Neolithic barriers from Nyang Caves. But when he and Tom occupied the house in Segubaglu in the 1950s, they started to look after the orphaned orangutans who lost their mothers due to poachings or due to illegal international trades. They tried to teach, to rehabilitate these orphaned orangutans and try to bring them back to the forest. This is one of the earliest rehabilitation projects conducted on orangutans. And because of these, Barbara Harrison's and the books that he produced in 1962 could be considered a pioneering female lady scientist that Sarawak had witnessed. And moving on to modern days, we have the tremendous useful information that we got from the field surveys of Sarawak Forestry Corporations and Wildlife Conservation Society Malaysia. Both of these important organizations has contributed tremendously towards our modern knowledge of orangutans. But today I'm going to talk about someone or the groups of European hunters from older period of time. And from historical figures like Wallace and Beccari, who had contributed to some of our early understandings of orangutans, who formed the very knowledge foundations for us to carry out most of the subsequent research on orangutans in Sarawak. Wallace and Beccari will be the focus of this talk, but I'm going to touch on other early administrators as well, like First Raja, James Brooke, Alfred Hart Everett, and other local Sarawakian administrators. But unfortunately, I can't find any pictures of Everett. So I took one of the orangutan skulls that he collected as a substitute. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about the administrators up north, Charles Post. Now, Wallace and Beccari are the better known among these white hunters because they left behind two marvelous, magnificent travel books that vividly record all the narratives of their scientific travels, their orangutan observations, the flora and fauna documentations of Sarawak and other areas in Southeast Asia. Now, the Malay archipelago produced by Alfred Russel Wallace is my all-time favorite book. It has never run out of print since the first publications in 1869. And even today, just walk out to the street to find a bookstore in Kuching, you could possibly find a copy of this book. And for anyone who loves to see an old editions of the book, perhaps may want to plan a visit to Port Margarita, because all that on exhibition, there's one old editions of the travel book put on public display. I'm not sure which editions this book might be, but it is definitely one of the oldest editions of the Malay archipelago that I have ever seen in Malaysia. The other older version that I've seen is in KL, in the private collections. The book by Beccari, however, is relatively not easy to find in Malaysia. But what good fortunes we are in age of IT. We could download it for free in digital format, his travel book. And I'm pretty sure that Senori and Beccari would be happy to know about this progress, because no tree will be chopped down to make the printed books, and that will save some of the plants that we so dearly love. Now, this meant I took it from the digital versions of Beccari's books, and I'm going to use it as a base map throughout my talk because I find it very useful in talking about the distributions of orangutans and then where actually these white hunters collected their specimens in Sarawak. Over this map, you can see some light green areas which represent roughly the current distributions of orangutans. They are mostly located on Batang Lupa. Modern day orangutans are found in a couple of protected areas in Sarawak. You have the Batang Ai National Park, Lanjak Adima Wildlife Sanctuary, and across the border in Ketung Kering Hund National Park in Kalimantan. And apart from that, living populations are also found in the Sedilu National Park and also the Ulu Sepuyau National Park. And perhaps there may be some sporadic small populations of orangutans still in the Simunjang areas, but we are not entirely sure about that. Now, in these two areas, it shows the general areas where Wallace and other hunters had collected their orangutan specimens, mostly from the Ulusupuyao and also the Simunjang. Whereas Beccari focused his collecting activities in the Ulu Batakluba area. And it seems that at that point of history, he may be the only person who has ventured into this part of Batakluba. Now let's start off with the first White Raja, Sir James Brooke. He contributed orangutan specimens to private collectors and also museums worldwide, especially back in UK in 1848. Some of his specimens may have been collected from the areas in the red and light blue boxes. James Brooke himself was not a hunter of big game. So perhaps he collected the orangutan specimens, he purchased it, or perhaps he received it from local communities and passed on to some of the museums outside of Sarawak, because at that time there was no museums or similar institutions anywhere in Sarawak. And some of his specimens ended up in the British museums of that time, now the Natural History Museums in South Kensington, London. And the specimens bear his names in the labels associated with the specimens, and some of them actually, I'm not sure whether you could read the cursive writings on your right. It's saying it is Maya's adult skull of orang of Borneo, Pithecus satyrus. That's the old scientific name for orangutans. Variant Maya's papan. Maya's papan is the large dominant male with flank cheeks. This is the local names given to such adult males. And it said that the Dayak think these specimens is the Maya's papan, as according to Sir James Brooke. So by reading these original labels attached to the skulls, we know that yes, this is the specimen that is associated with James Brooke. And apart from that, he also contributed a number of specimens to the Indian museums in Calcutta. As you could read from this small passage, say that the foregoing 7 skeletons from Borneo are presented to the Asiatic Society of Bengal by Sir James Brooke. These specimens of skins and skeletons of orangutans collected from Sarawak were studied by the leading zoologist in the museums, Edward Blyth. And Blyth even went so far as to name a new species of orangutans after James Brooke, using materials that he received from other people. He named it Pithecus brocchi. But unfortunately, in modern day science, this is an invalid scientific name. It has been known as simply a synonym to the most commonly used name for the northeast Bornean orangutans, Pongo pygmaeus morio. The next major contributors to our knowledge about Sarawak orangutans is none other than Alfred Russel Wallace. He started his orangutan observation and huntings around 1855 in these areas and the red and light blue boxes. Some of these materials ended up again in the Natural History Museums in London. And not only the bones, the skulls, but also skin specimens. I was very fortunate in 2009 when I started my study on the fossil orangutans from West Malaysia. I got a chance to visit the natural history museums in London, and you could see the right pictures of a younger me holding the skull of an orangutan collected by Alfred Russel Wallace. That's actually the beginnings of my modern day hunting research of orangutans. Some of his collections ended up in the World Museum in Liverpool. And if you are a fan of Alfred Russel Wallace and also read from cover to cover about his travels in the Malay archipelago, you could actually match up some of the museum specimens with the narratives that he wrote in his book. For example, these specimens that I look into in the World Museums in Liverpool more or less match with the descriptions that he remarked in his book. It was collected on 12 May 1855. It's the first full-grown individuals that he collected. He also measured the animals and gave the body dimensions of the animals in his book. And he mentioned about how he preserved the specimens in the field. The skin was preserved in Arak, and the full skeleton was prepared and ultimately sent to the World Museums in Liverpool. But in the collections of the World Museum in Liverpool, this one is most significant. It's the most remarkable specimens that I've ever come across of the Sarawak orangutans collected by Alfred Russel Wallace. This was collected, according to his book, in another branch of the Semonjang, to Menyang. There are small orangutans, and on the orangutans you could see there's one of the early labels that Alfred Russel Wallace attached to the specimens. It recorded faithfully that skull and skeletons were preserved, and it bears the catalog number of Alfred Russel Wallace. These amazing specimens, with both the upper and lower limbs, attached so closely to the chest of the animal as if the animal is hugging itself. It's very amazing to look at specimens that have been collected so long ago and preserved so well that you could just imagine how the animals might be like when it is alive. So, in a nutshell, Alfred Russel Wallace in his book summarized that he went to the Semonjang areas near the coal mines around March 1855 just in order to make observations of orangutans in the wild and, if possible, to collect the animals as a natural history specimens. So in total, he said that he had collected 70 individuals. He mentioned about 3 went inside the Derby Museum, which is the present-day World Museums in Liverpool, and 1 in British Museums. He provided body dimensions of some of the animals that he collected. He also mentioned briefly how he prepared the specimens. He preserved the skins in Arak, and then he used a great iron pan to boil the bones for the preservation of the skeletons. And sometimes he used natural decompositions of using earthworms or insects just to decompose the flesh in order to prepare the bones. But one of the most amazing moments that Wallace had with dealing with these orangutan specimens was recorded down in this book. After going all the troubles of chasing, following the orangutans in the field, and trying as hard as possible to preserve the specimens in the harshest and most rudimentary conditions that we could imagine. He met his most formidable enemies in the form of the domestic dogs. These active and ever-hungry domestic dogs seems to possess the superb skills of climbing to some of the higher and steeper parts of the longhouses where Wallace kept the specimens. And when these specimens were within reach of the dogs, they snatch it, they chewed on it, they eat parts of it, just like any puppies would do with the birds, like the birds today. And we shall see later on that this remained the source of headaches for our Odoardo Beccari as well. Now, Alfred Hart Everett, though I didn't manage to find any pictures of him, he is another figure that is worth mentioning with regards to the research of Sarawak orangutans. Now, Alfred Hart Everett, he, like James Brooke, was not a big game hunter. He collected, he purchased, and even received orangutan scouts from local communities. And these two scouts of a certain age has been received by Alfred Hart Everett, and they are now part of collections in the Natural History Museum in London. But the most important contributions of Alfred Hart Everett, in my opinion, are these isolated fossilized orangutan's teeth that it found around the Bow areas in 1878 or 79. These, to the best of my knowledge, are the first fossils of orangutans known to the world. And it is a tangible manifestations of Sarawak early contributions to world scientific investigations as early as 1878. Now comes the other main actors of our talk, Beccari. Beccari was in Sarawak for his scientific or natural history investigations from 1865 to 1868. In the beginning of his travels, he was accompanied by his wealthy friend, Giacomo Doria, who was the founder of the museum in Genova that I went to last year. But Doria was forced to return to Italy in the early stage of the travels due to poor health. But Beccari remained in Sarawak. It seems that he enjoyed good health and really cherished his art adventure in Sarawak for the next 2.5 years. He visited not just Sarawak, but also further afield to Labuan, Brunei, and even visited some of the freshwater inland lakes in Sarawak, Kalimantan area. Beccari was known as a field botanist. His major focus while doing natural history investigations in Sarawak and elsewhere are botanic plants. But at the same time, he is also an all-round naturalist. He will look into the birds, the insects, and of course, he won't miss the chance to observe and collect orangutans when he was in Sarawak. As mentioned before, he seems to be the only person who has ventured to Ulu Patang Lupa for the orangutans. He went there from March to May 1867, using Marot, near present-day Ingulili, as a base camp. He also went briefly to the Simunjams. He shot one orangutan for that, but due to the harsh circumstances, he failed to collect the specimens. And through a search on the internet, I realized that the house that Beccari stayed schemed the orangutans. It's still there in Marot. He stayed in the concert, the big buildings of the local Chinese headmen. He received orangutans in the surroundings of these areas. And it would be nice, perhaps, for friends of Sarawak Museum to organize a trip over there and do a recce and to do more works in commemorations of Beccari's works in Sarawak. Now, last year, before Christmas, I went to the Museum of Natural History in Genoa with the sole purpose of looking and documenting all the Sarawak orangutans that Beccari collected, because almost all of the specimens, animal specimens that he collected from Sarawak, ended up in this museum, whereas his botanical specimens ended up in Florence. So for those who are not familiar with the geography of Italy, you can see that Genoa is like Venice, is a port city. It's not very far from Milan. So if you've got the chance to go to Milan for shopping or for whatever reasons, please do visit the collections of Sarawak there in Genoa. It is beautiful port cities with, of course, nice food and nice wine. Most of the specimens that Beccari collected ended up in the exhibition area of these museums founded by Giacomo Doria. And on the right, you can see three specimens of orangutans. This is the adult females. This is juvenile. Both of these either could be from Pontianak. They were not collected by Beccari. They were collected or received by Giacomo Doria. But the dominant male over there, that specimen is definitely from Sarawak, based on museum record. And he has become some sort of a superstar for the museums. The museums printed the image of the orangutans on postcard and on their posters as well. Some of the skeletons that Beccari collected or Giacomo Doria received from Pontianak were put on display in the public galleries, educating the public about the anatomies of orangutans as compared to the human skull, and how the skeletons of orangutans as compared to other primates, including humans, can teach us about how we move around, how the orangutans move around. So parts of the collection has been used for educational purposes. And Beccari collected not just orangutans, but birds, including the symbol of Sarawak, Kenyala. And one of the most beautiful birds that you could find in the forest of Borneo, the blue-winged peacock. All are still preserved so nicely, so vividly colored. But these are not what I'm interested in. It's not the major objective of me going to Genoa. I want to go behind the walls. I want to see behind the scenes. I want to look at the collections in museums reserved for scientific research. And when I pass passed through some of the rooms at the back door. I looked through the high cupboards and peeked into it. I saw a couple of orangutan skeletons, and these were collected by Beccari from Sarawak. And some of the specimens that he collected are kept in these three inconspicuous looking boxes for the skulls. All are from Sarawak. And I brought along Beccari's travel book with me to Genoa, and I made sure that I read the book from cover to cover before I started off my research in Genoa. And it's simply amazing to read the narratives that Beccari wrote into the book and tried to link it up with the musical specimens that lay before my eyes. And by using the narratives in the books, the specimens that I have in my hands, and with the original labels, I could give a story to the music specimens that otherwise would be lost to most of the scientists. And over here you could see there are two types of labels attached to the museum specimens. One, this is the original labels that Beccari used. This is added later on. And Genoa, as one of the major seaports in Italy, was bombed heavily during the Second World War. And in the 1970s, Genoa also suffered massive floodings, with most of the collections, including the orangutans the Beccari collectors, were flooded in the basement. But somehow, they salvaged almost all of the specimens of the floods, and even those, some of the muds you can see still attached to the original labels. And very fortunately, I asked around some of the old museum staff. They told me that during the Second World War bombings, most of the zoological specimens there was saved, and only a small box of insect specimens was destroyed during the bombings. So the Sarawak orangutans that Beccari collectors survived some of the major disasters that humans have ever witnessed, and still retain and preserved in very good conditions today. You could compare some of the museum specimens with the pictures published in his book. And you could even connect the story, the narrative, written down in the book with the music specimens. This is not ordinary orangutans. They are mother and son. And I managed to know about these stories because I linked up the information that I got from the original labels with the narrative that Beccari wrote down so faithfully in his book. So these would add up much information to these museum specimens. So in his book, he mentions that he had collected about 24 individual orangutans from the Inkalili areas that he visited. Some individuals that he got from a local Chinese hunter with the name sound similar to mine, Hassan. Yeah, in the preparations of the specimens, he mentions in order to prevent the growth of fungus on the skins and also the skeletons, he applied a thick layer of arsenic on the specimens. It preserved the skin in strong solution of salt in alcohol. And again, it met with those formidable domestic dogs who tried to snatch his specimens. Now, the last historical figure that I will cover in this talk is is Charles Hurst, a local administrator in Sarawak. Like James Brooke and Alfred Russel Wallace, Charles Hurst was not a big game hunter himself, not like Alfred Russel Wallace or Odoardo Beccari, and most of his orangutan specimens collected or received in Sarawak went into various institutions in UK. Some ended up in the public exhibition areas in the Bornean Museum in UK. So on the left you can see two orangutans. These are definitely Sarawak orangutans collected by or received by Charles Hurst. And over here on the right pictures you can see a few skeletons, but only the skeleton in the middle. This one is orangutan, the others is other kinds of great apes. They were put together in order to show to the public how different great apes looks like in terms of their skeletons. Some of his specimens ended up in the museums and laboratories in Cambridge. And of course, the Natural History Museums in London as well. But in my view, the most important specimen from a scientific point of view that Charles Hurst contributed is now kept in the Duckworth Laboratory in University of Cambridge. Over here, there is a lower jaw and boxes full of skeletons of a couple of individuals of orangutans. And attached to the lower jaw, there's one labus that you can see. This is a mandible of orangutans known locally as mias from the Nia Caves in Sarawak. And Nia Caves were occupied by a party of USA collectors who only took skins of mias but left bones, which Charles Hurst got for meat. And that meat is the Duckworth. The anatomists in Cambridge set up the laboratory. And the team of USA explorers might be part of the team sent out to Sarawak by University of Pennsylvania to collect ethnographic materials from Sarawak. And two of the important figures are William Henry Furness III, the third guide from the left, and Hiram Milliken Hillard, the first guide on the left. And why these specimens that the American collected and Charles Hurst salvaged and kept in Cambridge was important. Because when you look at the present distribution of orangutans in Borneo, it seems that there is a big emptiness in the northern part of Sarawak. And based on our current knowledge and also looking through the old collections in the museum, it seems that this emptiness is not natural. Because previously we have the 1960s until all the recent records of orangutans in the Odoardo areas, and now by adding one museum specimens, we have one orangutans from near areas. Where nowadays you can't really find any living orangutans within 200-kilometer radius from near. So what are these orangutans? Are they totally new, or there are some perhaps new records for Sarawak? I do not know. Now, to some people, these old orangutans collected by the white hunters may be associated with dark history of animal killing. But as a scientist, they collectively contributed tremendously to increase our knowledge about orangutans. Many of them have been put on public display to educate the public about evolutions If properly studied, these old museum collections could possibly contribute new knowledge for us to better understand the past distributions and diversities of orangutans, not just in Sarawak, but the whole of Borneo. This knowledge might be important for the futures of orangutans in Borneo, for us to learn how to live in harmony with orangutans, as exemplified by these pictures over here. On the left, you have the skeletons of the orangutans collected by Chaucers, and they are holding hands in hands with the humans. So this would be the positive way to look into these old collections, with possibly with a dark history. And one of the cases closest to home is from Nian. From Nian, we have collected a lot of animal remains from the archaeological sites. If there is no comparative study of these materials with the modern materials that Wallace, Chaucer, James Bruce, Odoardo Beccari collected, we will have no idea what are these. And to have an accurate identification of the archaeological animal materials is the first step towards a better understanding of the archaeological past of humans, of animals' interactions in Borneo. And across the pond in West Malaysia, we have a similar story to tell as well. In West Malaysia, there is no longer any living orangutans in the forest. What remains is just drawings of orangutans produced by prehistoric humans. We found fossil teeth of orangutans in the caves, but if there is no comparative studies of these fossils with the modern collection, we have no idea that these teeth are of orangutans and not from other type of animals. So, in one way or another, the specimens that were collected by Wallace, Beccari, James Bruce, Chaucer, Everett, and others, many others, have come into play and assist in modern day scientific studies. Now, as I mentioned, I come into this personal project of headhuntings of the orangutans since 2009. When I first held the specimens of orangutans that Wallace collected from Sarawak. And I'm happy to say that it continued on. This type of research continued on. And that's one of the reasons I want to go to Journal and look at the orangutans specimens Beccari collected. All that. And I perhaps maybe only Malaysians dead or alive to have seen and studied these old museum collections collected from Sarawak. And I hope that in future there will be more local researchers, especially those young researchers from Sarawak, actively going out to museums, conducting scientific research to better document and to know about this past natural heritage of Sarawak. So, you say, what's next? Where to? It would be interesting to chase and look for the Sarawak orangutans collected by another big game hunters turned conservationist from North America, William Tamil Onade. He incidentally was one of the early members who founded the Wildlife Conservation Society. And even though I do not know where his Sarawak orangutan specimens were kept, but that is something to look for in future. So I think this would be my last slide. But before I end, a little bit of advertisement. I'm also interested in doing research on elephant fossils, especially those from Borneo. And sometime around next week, on 22nd April, I'll be talking about the origins of Bornean elephants and how a chance rediscovery of an important specimen from Nyakig, Sarawak reignited the debate of Asian elephants in Borneo. So, mark your date down and hope to see some of you over there. Alright, terima kasih banyak.